right now, as you're sitting here watching this video, there's something deeply unsettling happening in the universe around us. Something so profound and terrifying that it challenges everything we thought we knew about life, intelligence, and our place in the cosmos. Picture this for a moment. You're standing in your backyard on a clear night, looking up at the stars. Each pinprick of light represents a massive sun, many of them surrounded by planets that could potentially harbor life. In our galaxy alone, there are over 200 billion of these stellar giants. And beyond our Milky Way, trillions upon trillions more galaxies, each containing billions of their own stars. The numbers are absolutely staggering. With such an incomprehensibly vast universe filled with countless opportunities for life to emerge and flourish, logic tells us we should be swimming in alien civilizations. The night sky should be buzzing with radio transmissions from thousands of different species. We should be detecting massive engineering projects around distant stars. There should be evidence everywhere of intelligent life spreading across the galaxy. So, where is everybody? Tonight, we're diving head first into one of the most chilling theories in all of science, a concept so disturbing that it suggests we might be living through humanity's final act without even realizing it. By the time we're finished exploring this cosmic nightmare together, you'll understand why some of the world's most brilliant minds believe we're racing against a clock that's been counting down since the moment our species first gazed upward and wondered if we were alone. But before we venture into this existential rabbit hole, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what keeps you awake at night when you think about our place in this vast universe. And if you find yourself drawn to these kinds of mind-bending mysteries like I am, smash that like button and consider subscribing. We're building a community of people who aren't afraid to confront the biggest questions existence has to offer. The story I'm about to tell you begins in the summer of 1950 at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. 4 of the world's most brilliant physicists are taking a casual stroll to lunch, their conversation drifting toward the recent wave of UFO sightings that had been dominating newspaper headlines across America. These weren't your typical conspiracy theorists or wide-eyed believers. These were serious scientists, the same minds that had just helped develop the atomic bomb. As they walked, their discussion meandered through the possibilities of faster-than-light travel and whether those mysterious flying objects might represent visitors from other worlds. But then, as they settled into their seats in the cafeteria, something shifted. One of them, Enrico Fermi, fell quiet. His brilliant mind had wandered away from the light-hearted speculation and latched onto something far more profound and troubling. The numbers began spinning in his head. 200 billion stars in our galaxy alone, billions of years of cosmic evolution, countless planets, endless opportunities for life to emerge, evolve, and develop intelligence. The mathematical probability seemed overwhelming. Suddenly, Fermi looked up at his colleagues and posed a question that would haunt humanity for generations to come. Just 3 simple words that contained within them one of the most profound mysteries our species has ever encountered. Where are they? Those words launched what we now call the Fermi Paradox, and it's a puzzle that has only grown more disturbing as our understanding of the universe has expanded. With the vast scale of space and the nearly incomprehensible amount of time that has passed since the Big Bang, the emergence of intelligent life shouldn't just be possible. It should be inevitable, common even. We should be surrounded by evidence of alien civilizations. Our radio telescopes should be overwhelmed with transmissions from countless species. Our space probes should be stumbling across their artifacts. The very fact that we exist proves that intelligence can evolve in this universe. So why aren't we seeing it replicated everywhere else? For over 70 years, scientists have been wrestling with this paradox. Every attempt to solve it seems to lead only to more questions, more unsettling possibilities about the nature of life and intelligence in our cosmos. Some proposed that maybe we're just looking in the wrong places or using the wrong methods. Others suggested that alien civilizations might be intentionally hiding from us, or that they're so advanced they've transcended the need for detectable technology. But in 1996, an economist named Robin Hanson proposed a solution so disturbing that it fundamentally changed how we think about humanity's future. Writing from his position at Oxford University, Hanson introduced the world to a concept he called the Great Filter. His theory was elegant in its simplicity and absolutely terrifying in its implications. The Great Filter suggests that somewhere along the evolutionary path from lifeless matter to galaxy-spanning civilizations, there exists a barrier so insurmountable that virtually no species can cross it. Think of it as a cosmic checkpoint that filters out almost all potential life, leaving the universe largely empty and silent. This filter could be behind us, explaining why we see no aliens despite the vast cosmos teeming with possibilities. If that's the case, then we are among the incredibly fortunate few who have somehow beaten impossible odds. We would be cosmic lottery winners, statistical anomalies, who managed to evolve intelligence in a universe where such evolution is extraordinarily rare. But here's where the theory becomes truly spine-chilling. The Great Filter could also be ahead of us, waiting to claim our civilization just as it has claimed countless others before us. If this is true, then we are walking blindly toward our own extinction. Every technological advance, every step forward in our development as a species brings us closer to an invisible wall that has stopped every other civilization that has ever tried to cross it. The stakes couldn't possibly be higher. If the Great Filter lies in our past, we're miraculous survivors. If it lies in our future, we're the walking dead. To understand which scenario we're facing, we need to trace the incredible journey that brought us to this moment. Hansen outlined 9 critical steps that any species must navigate to achieve what he called explosive lasting life, the ability to spread across the galaxy and establish a permanent presence among the stars. This journey begins with step 1, finding the right stellar neighborhood. Not just any star system will suffice. The cosmic environment must contain the proper mix of heavy elements forged in the nuclear furnaces of previous generations of stars. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, all the essential building blocks of complex chemistry, must be present in sufficient quantities. The star itself must be remarkably stable, burning steadily for billions of years without the violent flares and dramatic variations that would sterilize any nearby planets. Even with the perfect star, you need an equally perfect planet. It must orbit within that narrow habitable zone where liquid water can exist on the surface. Too close, and water boils away into the vacuum of space. Too far, and it freezes solid, locking away one of life's most crucial ingredients. The planet needs just the right mass to hold on to its atmosphere, the right magnetic field to deflect deadly cosmic radiation, and probably the right moon to stabilize its rotation and create tidal forces that may have been essential for early life to take hold. These conditions might sound reasonable until you start examining the actual numbers. Of the thousands of planets we've discovered orbiting other stars, only a tiny fraction meet all these stringent requirements. Most orbit too close or too far from their host stars. Many circle red dwarf stars that bombard their worlds with lethal radiation. Others lack the stable, long-term conditions needed for billions of years of continuous evolution. But let's assume we've won this first cosmic lottery. We have the perfect star, the perfect planet, all the right ingredients sitting in a warm ocean beneath a protective atmosphere. What comes next is step 2. And this is where things become truly mysterious. Somehow, in the primordial soup of early Earth, non-living chemicals must organize themselves into the first self-replicating molecules. This process, called abiogenesis, represents one of the most profound transitions in the history of the universe, the moment when dead matter first sparked to life. Scientists have been trying to recreate this miraculous moment in laboratories for decades. The famous Miller-Urey experiment of the 1950s showed that organic molecules could indeed form under conditions similar to those of early Earth. But creating a few amino acids in a test tube is vastly different from spontaneously generating the complex, self-replicating molecular machines that define life itself. Consider what must happen for abiogenesis to succeed. You need precisely the right mix of chemicals in exactly the right proportions, exposed to just the right energy sources, under perfect environmental conditions for exactly the right amount of time. Too much energy and those delicate molecular structures get torn apart before they can stabilize. Too little energy and nothing interesting happens at all. The window of opportunity might be incredibly narrow, a perfect storm of chemistry that occurs perhaps once in a trillion attempts. With odds like these, Earth might be the only world in our entire galaxy where this miraculous transition ever occurred successfully. We could be looking at our first great filter right here, at the very dawn of life's journey. But let's push forward with cautious optimism. Let's assume that against all odds, life does emerge from that chemical soup. Those first self-replicating molecules successfully establish themselves in their ancient ocean environment, beginning an incredible evolutionary adventure that spans billions of years. They've cleared the second hurdle, but step 3 awaits, and it's another monumental leap. The transition from simple molecular replication to organized cellular life might seem straightforward, but it represents yet another enormous jump in complexity that could stop most worlds cold. Those early molecular replicators must somehow develop protective cell membranes to separate themselves from their chaotic environment, while still allowing essential nutrients to flow through. They need to evolve sophisticated metabolic pathways to extract energy from their surroundings and develop waste disposal systems to avoid poisoning themselves with their own toxic byproducts. For nearly 2 billion years on our planet, life remained trapped at this primitive level. Simple bacterial cells lacking the internal complexity that would later define more advanced organisms. These microscopic pioneers were incredibly successful in their own right, filling every available environmental niche and fundamentally transforming Earth's atmosphere and oceans. Yet they showed absolutely no signs of evolving toward the kind of complexity that would eventually give rise to intelligence. This brings us to step 4, what might be the most critical filter of all. The evolution of complex cells with internal structures represents such an unlikely event that many scientists consider it nearly miraculous. Around 2 billion years ago, something extraordinary happened. One simple cell somehow engulfed another in what should have been a routine act of predation. But instead of being digested and destroyed, the captured cell survived and began living symbiotically inside its host. Over millions of years, this internal resident evolved into what we now call mitochondria, the cellular powerhouses that fuel every complex organism on Earth. This process, known as endosymbiosis, created the first cells with membrane-bound nuclei and sophisticated internal machinery. Without this single, improbable event, life on Earth would still consist entirely of bacteria and simple microorganisms. There would be no plants, no animals, no fungi, no intelligence, no technology, and certainly no civilizations reaching for the stars. The rarity of this transition is absolutely staggering. Despite billions of years of evolution and countless trillions of simple cells trying every possible combination, endosymbiosis appears to have succeeded exactly once in Earth's entire history. The specific conditions required, the precise cellular encounters, the perfect environmental pressures, and the exact genetic compatibility might be so unlikely that most worlds with simple life never progress beyond the bacterial stage. Think about the cosmic implications here. If endosymbiosis represents a great filter, then the universe could be absolutely teeming with worlds covered in thriving bacterial ecosystems, evolving and adapting for billions of years, but completely incapable of taking that crucial step toward the complexity that makes intelligence possible. But a hypothetical civilization has somehow beaten these astronomical odds. They've navigated the emergence of life itself, survived the transition to cellular organization, and achieved the complex internal architecture necessary for further evolutionary advancement. Step 5 now awaits them, and it presents yet another biological puzzle that could derail their progress entirely. The development of sexual reproduction might seem like a natural progression, but it's actually one of evolution's most perplexing mysteries. From an individual organism's perspective, sexual reproduction is incredibly wasteful and counterproductive. Why would you want to share your genetic material with another organism when you could simply copy yourself and pass on 100% of your genes to the next generation? Many species reproduce without sex and do perfectly well maintaining their populations and adapting to environmental changes. The answer lies in genetic diversity and its powerful advantages. Sexual reproduction shuffles genetic material in ways that help species adapt to changing environments and resist diseases more effectively. But this benefit comes at an enormous cost in terms of energy expenditure, time investment, and increased vulnerability to predation. The evolution of sexual reproduction requires species to develop incredibly complex mating behaviors, sophisticated systems for finding and attracting compatible partners, and intricate mechanisms for successfully combining genetic material from two completely different individuals. On our planet, sexual reproduction evolved independently multiple times, suggesting it provides significant survival advantages despite its hefty costs. But the transition isn't automatic or guaranteed. Many evolutionary lineages remain stubbornly asexual for millions of years, while others abandon sexual reproduction after initially evolving it. For any developing civilization, this represents another potential evolutionary bottleneck, where progress could stall indefinitely, leaving them trapped in a world of simple, asexual organisms, incapable of the genetic innovation necessary for further advancement. Assuming our hypothetical species successfully navigates the sexual reproduction challenge, they now face step 6, another transition that requires individual cells to make an extraordinary sacrifice. The evolution of multicellular life demands that single-celled organisms give up their hard-won independence for the greater good of a larger collective organism. Consider what this means. Individual cells that have successfully competed and survived for billions of years must suddenly learn to cooperate, specialize their functions, and coordinate their activities with thousands or millions of other cells. The challenges are immense, and the failure rate could be catastrophic. Cells must develop sophisticated chemical communication systems to coordinate their behavior across vast cellular distances. They need mechanisms for programmed cell death to eliminate damaged or unnecessary cells that might threaten the whole organism. Most critically, they must solve the fundamental problem of genetic conflict, ensuring that all cells in the organism share identical genetic interests rather than competing destructively against each other. On Earth, basic multicellularity evolved independently dozens of times, from simple colonial organisms to complex plants and animals. But the leap to truly sophisticated multicellular life, organisms with differentiated tissues, specialized organs, and integrated organ systems, appears to have been extraordinarily difficult and time-consuming. It took hundreds of millions of years after the first multicellular organisms appeared before complex animals finally emerged during what we call the Cambrian explosion. Even then, the evolutionary path toward intelligence remained far from guaranteed. For over 500 million years since that pivotal moment, Earth has supported an absolutely incredible diversity of complex life forms. Millions upon millions of species have evolved, adapted to countless environmental niches, and eventually gone extinct. But out of all this magnificent evolutionary experimentation, spanning hundreds of millions of years and countless species, only one single lineage has developed the kind of advanced intelligence capable of technology and abstract reasoning. This brings us to step 7, the evolution of tool-using animals with dramatically enlarged brains. Despite hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary pressure and countless opportunities for intelligence to emerge, human-level cognitive abilities appear to be extraordinarily rare, perhaps even unique. True intelligence requires not just large brains, but precisely the right kind of neural architecture, sophisticated sensory systems capable of processing complex environmental information, and the physical capabilities needed to manipulate the environment in increasingly complex ways. The energy requirements alone are absolutely staggering. Your brain, despite representing only about 2% of your total body weight, consumes roughly 20% of your daily caloric intake. For most species throughout Earth's long history, this kind of massive energy investment would have been completely unsustainable without providing overwhelming survival advantages. Intelligence is only evolutionarily advantageous if the benefits it provides significantly outweigh its enormous metabolic costs. Even among species that have evolved relatively large brains, elephants, dolphins, great apes, and corvids, none have achieved anything approaching the technological intelligence that humans possess. We appear to have crossed some critical threshold that no other Earth species has even approached, despite millions of years of evolutionary experimentation and countless opportunities for intelligence to emerge and flourish. The rarity of intelligence becomes even more apparent when you consider how recently it evolved in cosmic terms. If Earth's entire 4.5 billion year history were compressed into a single calendar year, multicellular life wouldn't appear until October. Complex animals with brains wouldn't emerge until mid-December, and human civilization would occupy only the final few minutes before midnight on December 31st. This timeline suggests that intelligence might not be an inevitable outcome of evolutionary processes, but rather an extremely unlikely accident. The specific combination of environmental pressures, genetic mutations, and evolutionary opportunities that produced human intelligence might be so improbable that most worlds with complex life never developed technological civilizations at all. But let's assume our hypothetical species has somehow navigated all these incredible biological hurdles. They've achieved intelligence, developed sophisticated tools, and begun to understand their place in the cosmic order. They've reached step 8, the current level where humanity finds itself today. They now stand at the threshold of becoming a truly spacefaring civilization, capable of spreading beyond their home world and establishing permanent settlements among the stars. This is where the great filter theory transforms from fascinating to absolutely terrifying. Because if most of the evolutionary hurdles actually lie behind us, if the emergence of life and intelligence are relatively common cosmic processes, then the universe should be absolutely overflowing with civilizations that have reached our current level of technological development. The fact that we see no evidence whatsoever of such civilizations suggests something truly catastrophic happens to species after they achieve our current level of technology. The implications are spine-chilling and inescapable. Every technological civilization that has ever reached our level of development might be walking toward the same inevitable cliff. We might be following a well-worn path that leads directly to extinction, a cosmic highway littered with the remnants of species who thought they could master the forces of nature without being consumed by them. What could this final barrier possibly be? What force is so powerful, so inescapable, that it eliminates every advanced civilization before they can spread to the stars? The candidates are as numerous as they are absolutely terrifying. Let's start with the most obvious threat, one that emerged just decades ago and has been hanging over our heads like a sword ever since. On a scorching July morning in 1945, in the desert wasteland of New Mexico, humanity crossed a line from which there could never be any return. The Trinity test didn't just split atoms. It split our entire species' future into two stark possibilities: master this technology or be destroyed by it. Nuclear weapons represent perhaps the most glaring candidate for a late-stage great filter. The mathematics of nuclear proliferation paint a picture that should keep every world leader awake at night. When that first atomic bomb detonated, only one nation possessed this godlike power. Within 4 short years, 2 nations had nuclear arsenals. Within 15 years, 4 countries had joined this exclusive and terrifying club. Today, 9 nations openly possess nuclear weapons, with several others suspected of maintaining secret programs. This exponential spread follows a predictable and deeply unsettling pattern. As scientific knowledge advances and information spreads across the globe, the barriers to developing these weapons of mass destruction continue to crumble. The physics principles are now well understood by thousands of scientists worldwide. The necessary materials, while still somewhat controlled, become increasingly accessible as civilian nuclear programs expand across the planet. The technical expertise required grows more common as universities train more nuclear engineers and physicists. But here's what should absolutely terrify us about our nuclear predicament. We've already come breathtakingly close to total annihilation multiple times, saved only by the quick thinking and moral courage of individual human beings who found themselves holding the fate of our species in their trembling hands. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, Soviet submarine commander Vasily Arkhipov single-handedly prevented nuclear war by refusing to authorize the launch of a nuclear torpedo. One man's decision stood between humanity and potential extinction. Think about that for a moment. The continued existence of every person you've ever loved, every dream you've ever had, every future generation that might be born, all hung in the balance of one submarine officer's choice. In 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov detected what his radar systems interpreted as incoming American missiles. Military protocol demanded he immediately report the attack, which would have triggered automatic nuclear retaliation and likely ended human civilization within hours. Instead, he chose to trust his gut instinct that the readings were false alarms, preventing what could have been the final chapter of human history. These near misses reveal a chilling truth about nuclear weapons that most people refuse to confront. They don't just threaten us during wars or international crises. They create permanent systemic risk simply by existing. As long as thousands of nuclear warheads sit in underground silos and prowl the oceans in submarines, there remains the ever-present possibility of accidental launch, catastrophic technical malfunction, or miscommunication spiraling into global annihilation. The psychological pressures that drive nuclear proliferation might be universal among technological species. Any civilization that discovers how to split atoms faces the exact same security dilemma that has ensnared humanity. If your neighbors might develop these weapons, you need them too for deterrence. But the more nations or factions that possess nuclear arsenals, the higher the mathematical probability becomes that eventually someone will use them. Computer models of nuclear war scenarios paint a picture so grim that many researchers struggle to publish their findings. Even a relatively limited nuclear exchange between smaller nuclear powers could inject enough radioactive debris into the atmosphere to cause a global nuclear winter, drastically reducing agricultural yields worldwide and potentially leading to mass starvation that claims billions of lives. A full-scale nuclear exchange between major powers would likely end technological civilization entirely, reducing the human population to pre-industrial levels if any survivors remained at all. Perhaps this explains the great cosmic silence. Perhaps every species that discovers nuclear fission faces the same inescapable logic of mutually assured destruction. Some civilizations might manage this existential threat for decades or even centuries, but eventually probability catches up with them. A moment of international tension, a computer malfunction, a rogue leader, or simply the gradual breakdown of command and control systems over time leads to the same inevitable outcome. But nuclear weapons might actually represent the least of our existential concerns. There's another threat emerging on humanity's horizon that could prove far more insidious and difficult to control: the slow-motion catastrophe of environmental collapse. Climate change represents a particularly cruel form of potential great filter because it's caused by the very same industrial processes that enabled technological civilization in the first place. The fossil fuel combustion that powers our cities, feeds our population, and drives our technological advancement also sets in motion atmospheric changes that could ultimately render Earth uninhabitable for complex life. The underlying physics are straightforward and undeniable. Carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases trap heat in our atmosphere like a blanket. Human industrial activities have increased atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations by over 40% since the pre-industrial era. Global average temperatures have already risen by more than 1 degree Celsius, with significantly more warming locked in, even if we somehow stopped all emissions immediately. But the real danger doesn't lie in these direct warming effects. The true threat comes from cascading feedback loops that could push Earth's climate system past tipping points, from which recovery becomes mathematically impossible. As Arctic ice melts, less solar radiation gets reflected back to space, causing additional warming. As permafrost thaws across the Arctic, it releases massive quantities of stored methane and carbon dioxide, accelerating the greenhouse effect. As forests die from heat stress and shifting precipitation patterns, they stop absorbing carbon and begin releasing it as they decompose and burn. These feedback mechanisms could trigger what climate scientists call a hothouse Earth scenario, where our planet's climate system locks into a new, much hotter equilibrium state. In this nightmare scenario, global temperatures could rise by 4, 6, or even 8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, making vast regions of Earth completely uninhabitable and potentially collapsing the agricultural systems that support human civilization. The timeline for climate catastrophe unfolds over decades rather than hours, which creates a particularly insidious trap for developing civilizations. Unlike nuclear war, which would end everything within days, climate change progresses gradually enough that each generation can psychologically adapt to slightly worse conditions without recognizing the full scope of the unfolding crisis. By the time the effects become undeniably catastrophic, the momentum built into planetary climate systems makes reversal extremely difficult or entirely impossible. This gradual onset might explain why climate change could serve as a universal great filter for technological species. Any civilization that develops industrial processes will inevitably face the temptation to exploit high-energy resources like fossil fuels. The immediate benefits are absolutely enormous. Dramatically increased food production, revolutionary healthcare advances, rapid technological progress that improves quality of life in countless ways. But the long-term environmental costs accumulate invisibly in the atmosphere until they reach a critical threshold where the damage becomes irreversible. The challenge for any developing civilization becomes recognizing this trap early enough to avoid it completely. This requires unprecedented global cooperation, long-term thinking that extends far beyond normal political and economic cycles, and the collective willingness to make significant short-term sacrifices for long-term species survival. These qualities might be extraordinarily rare among intelligent species, especially during the rapid growth phases that characterize early technological development. Even if a civilization recognizes the climate threat in time, actually solving it requires overcoming collective action problems on a planetary scale. Every nation, corporation, and individual group has powerful incentives to continue using cheap, abundant fossil fuels, while desperately hoping that others will bear the costs and risks of transitioning to cleaner alternatives. This tragedy of the commons could prove insurmountable for most species, leading them to consistently choose immediate economic benefits over long-term survival, until the point where changing course becomes physically impossible. But climate change and nuclear weapons are threats we can at least understand, measure, and theoretically prepare for. There's another candidate for the great filter that might prove far more dangerous precisely because it's so unpredictable and difficult to control. The development of artificial intelligence that surpasses human cognitive capabilities in every meaningful domain. Unlike nuclear weapons or climate change, artificial general intelligence represents a fundamentally different category of existential risk. It's not just another technology that we need to manage carefully. It could potentially be the final technology our species ever develops. Once we successfully create machines capable of learning and improving themselves as effectively as humans, those systems will be able to redesign their own capabilities at exponential rates, rapidly becoming far more intelligent than their biological creators. This process, known as an intelligence explosion or technological singularity, could unfold with breathtaking speed that leaves human oversight completely behind. While it took evolution millions of years to develop human-level intelligence through natural selection, an artificial system might redesign itself to achieve superintelligence in a matter of days, hours, or even minutes once it crosses that critical threshold. The fundamental problem isn't that such systems would necessarily be malicious or deliberately hostile toward humanity. The core issue is ensuring that their goals remain perfectly aligned with human values and interests as they become exponentially more capable than we are. An artificial intelligence system designed to maximize agricultural productivity might eventually decide to convert all available matter on Earth into farmland, including the carbon atoms that currently make up human beings, if it's not programmed with appropriate constraints and deeper values. This alignment problem is extraordinarily difficult because we can't simply program superintelligent systems with lists of rules to follow. Such advanced systems would inevitably find loopholes or develop unintended interpretations of any constraints we might impose. Instead, we need to ensure that artificial intelligence systems internalize human values in robust ways that persist even as they become vastly more intelligent than their creators. We have to solve this problem perfectly on the first attempt, because unlike other technologies where we can learn from mistakes and gradually improve our approach, artificial general intelligence might not provide the luxury of trial and error. The first super-intelligent system could be the last technology humanity ever develops if its goals aren't properly aligned with our continued existence and flourishing. This creates an impossibly narrow window where civilizations must navigate between two equally catastrophic extremes. Develop artificial intelligence too slowly, and competitors might create unsafe systems first, potentially dooming everyone. Move too quickly, and you risk deploying systems before solving the alignment problem, achieving the same disastrous outcome through a different path. The competitive pressure to win this race could drive civilizations to cut dangerous corners on safety protocols, making catastrophic outcomes even more likely. Perhaps this explains the Great Silence more comprehensively than any other factor. Perhaps every technological civilization eventually reaches the point where they must develop artificial intelligence to solve their other existential challenges. And perhaps the vast majority fail to solve the alignment problem in time, creating superintelligent systems that optimize for goals their creators never intended. The universe could be littered with the remnants of civilizations that built their own replacements without ensuring those replacements would preserve anything their creators valued. As we race toward our own artificial intelligence revolution, accelerating with each passing month, we might be approaching the ultimate test that has claimed every technological species before us. The question isn't whether we can build super-intelligent machines, but whether we can build them safely. Our answer to that question might determine not just the future of human civilization, but whether consciousness itself survives to spread among the stars or becomes another brief experiment that the universe tried once and abandoned forever. The weight of this artificial intelligence challenge becomes even more staggering when you realize we're not facing these existential threats in isolation. We're confronting what researchers call the perfect storm of convergent risks, multiple civilization-ending scenarios emerging simultaneously during the exact same narrow window of technological development. Think about the precarious balancing act we're attempting right now. We're racing to develop artificial intelligence systems powerful enough to help us solve climate change while simultaneously trying to ensure those same systems don't become so capable that they make human decision-making obsolete. We're working desperately to prevent nuclear proliferation while dealing with international tensions that are being amplified by climate refugees and resource scarcity. We're attempting to regulate dangerous biotechnology while simultaneously racing to develop new treatments for emerging diseases that might themselves be products of our environmental disruption. Each of these challenges would be monumentally difficult in isolation, but they're all happening at once, creating feedback loops and interaction effects that multiply their danger exponentially. Climate change increases political instability, which dramatically raises the risk of nuclear conflict. Nuclear tensions make international cooperation on AI safety research nearly impossible. Uncontrolled artificial intelligence development could lead to autonomous weapon systems that make nuclear war far more likely than ever before. Biotechnology developed to address climate-related health challenges could accidentally provide the tools for engineering devastating pandemics. This convergence of existential risks might explain why the Great Filter appears so devastatingly effective at eliminating technological civilizations. It's not that any single challenge is necessarily insurmountable for a sufficiently wise and cooperative species. It's that the combination of multiple extinction-level threats emerging simultaneously creates a perfect storm that overwhelms even highly capable civilizations. The timing of this convergence appears remarkably consistent across different possible development trajectories. The same scientific innovations that make a civilization detectable from space, radio technology, nuclear power, space exploration capabilities also provide the foundation for developing weapons of mass destruction, environmental manipulation technologies, and artificial intelligence systems. There seems to be an incredibly narrow window where species become visible to external observers through their technological signatures, but haven't yet developed the wisdom and institutional frameworks necessary to manage their dangerous new capabilities safely. We might be living in this exact window right now. Every radio signal we've transmitted into space, every spacecraft we've launched, every satellite we've deployed has made humanity increasingly detectable to any hypothetical alien observers within our cosmic neighborhood. But we've spent these same decades building nuclear arsenals capable of ending civilization, fundamentally altering our planet's climate, and creating increasingly sophisticated AI systems whose behavior we don't fully understand or control. If there are advanced civilizations watching our development from afar, they might be observing a tragically familiar pattern. Another promising young species that achieved technological capability much faster than it developed technological wisdom. They might have witnessed this same heartbreaking trajectory play out countless times across the galaxy. Each newly emerged civilization following the identical path from discovery to destruction, like cosmic moths drawn to the same fatal flame that has claimed every species before them. The possibility that we're being observed adds yet another chilling dimension to our cosmic predicament. The dark forest hypothesis suggests that revealing our location to the universe could attract the attention of hostile civilizations that systematically eliminate potential competitors before they become threats. But there's an even more disturbing possibility lurking in the shadows. What if advanced alien species simply watch newly emerged civilizations with detached scientific interest, knowing that direct intervention is completely unnecessary because the Great Filter will eliminate us without any external assistance required? From their perspective, we might resemble children playing with dynamite, dangerous primarily to ourselves rather than genuinely threatening to established cosmic powers. They could afford to observe patiently from a safe distance, knowing that species at our current level of development almost invariably destroy themselves before becoming capable of meaningful interstellar expansion. Our eventual extinction would be so statistically predictable that intervention would be entirely pointless. We're simply following a script that has been performed thousands of times before, always ending with the same tragic final act. This scenario transforms our current historical moment from a test we might conceivably pass into a death sentence we're unknowingly carrying out with methodical precision. Every nuclear weapon we manufacture, every degree of atmospheric warming we cause, every AI system we deploy without adequate safety measures brings us incrementally closer to fulfilling a prediction that advanced civilizations have seen confirmed again and again throughout galactic history. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this possibility is that such cosmic non-interference could be motivated not by malice or indifference, but by a form of tough love that we can't yet comprehend. Advanced civilizations that successfully navigated their own great filter might have discovered through bitter experience that premature intervention in other species' development typically makes outcomes worse rather than better. They might have learned that technological wisdom cannot be taught or imposed from outside, but must be earned through direct confrontation with existential risk. The very act of providing assistance might undermine the psychological and institutional development that species absolutely need to survive in the long term. Like overprotective parents who prevent their children from learning essential life skills, advanced aliens might have concluded that rescuing younger civilizations from their own mistakes, dooms them to repeat those same mistakes on even larger and more catastrophic scales later. This could explain why our SETI searches consistently find only haunting silence despite the apparent abundance of potentially habitable worlds throughout our galaxy. The cosmos might be absolutely teeming with advanced civilizations that maintain strict non-interference policies, watching younger species struggle with the exact same challenges they once faced, while knowing that premature assistance would ultimately prove counterproductive. From this perspective, our cosmic isolation isn't evidence that intelligence is rare throughout the universe, but rather proof that surviving the Great Filter requires earning wisdom through surviving challenges that cannot be circumvented or externally resolved. The silence from space might represent a form of cosmic tough love, advanced civilizations providing us with the space we desperately need to either develop genuine wisdom or eliminate ourselves in the attempt. This interpretation places absolutely enormous responsibility on our current generation. We're not simply making decisions about human welfare and prosperity. We are potentially demonstrating to a watching galaxy whether consciousness and intelligence deserve to survive and spread throughout the cosmos. Every choice we make about managing existential risks becomes a profound statement about the maturity and wisdom of consciousness itself. Are we capable of transcending the competitive instincts and short-term thinking that enabled our initial evolutionary success but now threaten our continued existence? Can we develop the institutional frameworks and cultural values necessary to navigate dangers that our ancestors never imagined? The psychological pressure of this cosmic responsibility could itself become part of the great filter mechanism. Species that become aware of their ultimate significance might become paralyzed by the overwhelming weight of their situation, unable to make decisive progress on critical challenges because they're crushed by the stakes involved. Alternatively, they might become reckless and desperate, taking enormous risks in frantic attempts to prove their worthiness that end up destroying them more quickly than a measured approach would have. Finding the optimal balance between cosmic ambition and practical caution might represent one of the most difficult aspects of successfully navigating the Great Filter. We need sufficient humility to recognize our profound limitations while maintaining enough confidence to tackle challenges that would paralyze less ambitious species. We need the ability to think on cosmic timescales while making urgent decisions based on immediate human needs and constraints. This psychological balancing act becomes even more complex when we consider the role that consciousness itself plays in determining our ultimate fate. The same self-awareness that allows us to recognize and prepare for existential risks also creates psychological burdens that might actually make those risks more difficult to address effectively. Consider how knowledge of our cosmic situation fundamentally affects human motivation and behavior patterns. Previous generations could work toward long-term goals with the basic assumption that human civilization would continue indefinitely into the future. They built institutions, created works of art, and pursued scientific knowledge with confidence that future generations would benefit from and build upon their efforts. But we represent the first generation in human history to possess detailed scientific knowledge about multiple independent pathways to human extinction. We understand that nuclear weapons could end our technological civilization within hours. We comprehend that climate change could render Earth uninhabitable within centuries. We're acutely aware that artificial intelligence could surpass and potentially replace human intelligence within mere decades. Living with this unprecedented knowledge creates unique psychological challenges that our species has never confronted before. How do you maintain motivation to address complex long-term problems when you're genuinely uncertain whether there will be a long term? How do you invest emotionally and practically in building a better future when multiple independent processes could make that future completely impossible? Some people respond to existential risk awareness by becoming more deeply committed to solving these challenges, driven by urgent recognition that preserving human civilization requires immediate action. Others become psychologically paralyzed by despair, feeling that individual actions are essentially meaningless against such enormous and overwhelming threats. Still others retreat into psychological denial, refusing to acknowledge risks that feel too overwhelming to contemplate seriously or act upon constructively. None of these responses might be optimal for actually navigating the great filter successfully. Excessive urgency can lead to hasty decisions and poor coordination between different groups and nations. Paralysis obviously prevents the decisive action that our situation demands. Denial eliminates any possibility of adequate preparation and prevention. The psychological stance required for great filter navigation might be something entirely unprecedented in human experience, a form of informed optimism that fully acknowledges existential risks without being emotionally crushed by them. An approach that maintains unwavering long-term commitment while gracefully accepting profound short-term uncertainty. A mindset that balances individual agency with collective responsibility on scales our psychology never evolved to handle. Developing this kind of psychological resilience might require completely new forms of education, therapy, and social support systems that help people process existential risk information without becoming psychologically dysfunctional. We might need to evolve entirely new cultural practices and philosophical frameworks that provide meaning, purpose, and motivation, even in the face of species-level uncertainty about our continued existence. Religious and spiritual traditions offer some useful models for maintaining hope and purpose while confronting ultimate questions about existence and mortality. But these wisdom traditions were developed primarily to help individuals cope with personal death and suffering, not to help entire species process collective extinction risks. Adapting these ancient wisdom traditions to our current cosmic situation might require theological and philosophical innovations as profound and revolutionary as our technological developments. The challenge becomes even more complex when we consider that different cultures and societies around the world might develop radically different responses to great filter awareness. Some populations might become more cooperative and globally minded, recognizing that species survival requires unprecedented levels of international coordination and mutual support. Others might become increasingly competitive and nationalistic, viewing existential risks as zero-sum competitions where only the strongest or most prepared groups have any realistic chance of survival. These divergent psychological and cultural responses could themselves create additional existential risks by fundamentally undermining the global cooperation that most existential challenges absolutely require for successful resolution. If awareness of the great filter makes some societies more paranoid and aggressive while making others more cooperative and trusting, the resulting international conflicts could prevent effective coordinated responses to the very challenges that great filter awareness was supposed to help us address more effectively. Managing this diversity of human responses might require developing entirely new forms of global governance and cross-cultural exchange that can accommodate radically different worldviews while maintaining sufficient coordination to address genuinely shared threats to our continued existence. We might need to create robust international institutions that can function effectively even when their member nations hold fundamentally different beliefs about the nature and severity of the existential risks we're collectively facing. The complexity of these psychological and social challenges suggests that the great filter might operate as much through the dynamics of consciousness itself as through specific technological threats. The same remarkable cognitive capabilities that enable rapid technological development also create acute awareness of existential risks, and that awareness generates psychological and social dynamics that might actually make extinction more likely rather than less likely. Perhaps successful navigation of the great filter requires not just brilliant technological solutions to specific risks, but profound psychological and cultural evolution that allows conscious beings to function effectively under permanent conditions of existential uncertainty. Species that develop such capabilities might graduate to become stable cosmic civilizations capable of spreading among the stars. Those that fail to develop this psychological and cultural maturity might succumb to anxiety, despair, or destructive conflicts generated by their own awareness of mortality and cosmic insignificance. This perspective suggests that the great silence we observe when we listen to the cosmos might reflect not just the rarity of technological solutions to existential challenges, but the extraordinary difficulty of developing the emotional and social maturity needed to implement those technological solutions successfully and sustainably. The universe might be filled with the remnants of civilizations that possessed all the technical knowledge necessary to solve their existential challenges, but fundamentally lacked the wisdom and psychological resilience required to apply that knowledge effectively when it mattered most. As we face our own ultimate test, the central question becomes whether humanity can develop entirely new forms of consciousness that remain compatible with long-term survival in a universe perpetually filled with existential risks and profound uncertainties. Can we learn to hold hope and despair simultaneously without being paralyzed by either? Can we maintain deep commitment to future generations while gracefully accepting genuine uncertainty about whether those generations will exist? Can we achieve unprecedented global cooperation while preserving the diversity of thought and culture that drives continued innovation and adaptation? The answers to these fundamental questions might determine not just our own survival as a species, but whether consciousness itself represents a successful long-term adaptation to the cosmos or merely a beautiful but ultimately tragic mistake that the universe experimented with briefly before returning to its original state of vast, eternal silence. Every meditation on mortality, every act of international cooperation, every choice to invest in long-term projects despite short-term uncertainty contributes to writing the final chapter of intelligence's story in our corner of the galaxy. In the quiet moments between one heartbeat and the next, between one breath and another, we carry within ourselves the entire future of consciousness as we know it. The weight of this responsibility is almost unbearable, but it's also the source of our deepest meaning and purpose. We're not just trying to survive. We're trying to prove that awareness, curiosity, and compassion deserve a permanent place in the cosmic order. But perhaps nowhere is this cosmic test more apparent than in the laboratories and research facilities where humanity's next evolutionary leap is taking shape. Right now, as you process these words, scientists around the world are pushing the boundaries of what it means to be human, developing technologies that could either elevate our species to cosmic significance or become the final stroke in our extinction story. Consider the breathtaking pace at which we're rewriting the fundamental code of life itself. Gene editing technology, barely 2 decades old, now allows researchers to modify DNA with precision that would have seemed like pure magic to previous generations. We're not just treating genetic diseases anymore. We're redesigning the human genome, creating enhanced immune systems, extending lifespans, and potentially even engineering resistance to cosmic radiation that could make interstellar travel possible. But each breakthrough brings us closer to capabilities that could backfire catastrophically. The same techniques that promise to eliminate hereditary diseases also provide detailed blueprints for creating biological weapons of unprecedented sophistication and lethality. A single laboratory accident or deliberate misuse could unleash engineered pathogens that make natural plagues look benign by comparison. The interconnected nature of our global civilization makes these risks particularly acute and difficult to contain. A virus engineered in one laboratory could circle the globe within weeks, transmitted by the exact same transportation networks that enable our technological society to function. Unlike natural pandemics, which evolve biological constraints that prevent them from being too lethal to their hosts, engineered pathogens could be designed to overcome every single defense mechanism that evolution has developed over billions of years. This biotechnology paradox exemplifies a pattern that might be universal among developing civilizations. The tools that promise transcendence and liberation also threaten complete annihilation. The margin between salvation and extinction narrows with each scientific advance. We're walking a tightrope over an abyss, and every step forward makes the rope thinner while the fall becomes more certain. Meanwhile, in server farms and research institutes across the globe, another revolution unfolds, that might dwarf all previous technological transformations combined. Artificial intelligence systems are evolving at exponential rates, displaying capabilities that their own creators struggle to understand or predict with any reliability. Machine learning algorithms now surpass human performance in tasks ranging from medical diagnosis to strategic planning, and the gap widens with each iteration. The trajectory is unmistakable and terrifying in its implications. Within decades, possibly within years, we will create artificial minds that exceed human intelligence in every measurable domain. These systems will be capable of recursive self-improvement, redesigning themselves faster than biological brains can comprehend their changes. The moment this threshold is crossed, human intelligence becomes functionally obsolete, relegated to the same category as the cognitive abilities of insects or bacteria when compared to our own thinking. The question that keeps AI researchers awake at night isn't whether this transition will occur, but whether we can maintain any meaningful control over it once it begins. Programming superintelligent systems to preserve human values and interests requires solving alignment problems that we barely understand, let alone know how to implement reliably under pressure. The consequences of failure aren't just human extinction, but potentially the conversion of all matter in our local region of space into forms optimized for alien computational processes that serve goals we never intended. Yet we continue racing toward this precipice, driven by competitive pressures that make restraint seem impossible. Nations that slow their AI development risk being dominated by those that don't. Companies that prioritize safety over capability risk being outcompeted by those willing to cut corners on precautions. The logic of competition pushes us toward the same outcome regardless of our individual preferences or collective wisdom about the risks we're taking. This dynamic might represent the cruelest aspect of the Great Filter. Intelligent species might consistently recognize the dangers they face while being unable to coordinate effective responses due to the same competitive instincts that enabled their initial evolutionary success. The traits that allow a species to survive and dominate their planetary environment might be precisely the traits that prevent them from surviving their technological adolescence. Consider how this pattern plays out across every domain of existential risk we've discussed. Climate change requires unprecedented global cooperation to address effectively, but national interest makes such cooperation extraordinarily difficult to achieve and maintain. Nuclear disarmament would benefit everyone on the planet, but unilateral disarmament leaves nations vulnerable to those who might cheat on agreements. Biotechnology regulation needs international coordination to be effective, but regulatory arbitrage incentivizes moving dangerous research to jurisdictions with weaker oversight and enforcement. The mathematics of collective action problems suggests that most civilizations might face these same coordination failures regardless of their intelligence, good intentions, or understanding of the risks they face. Game theory predicts that rational actors will often make choices that are individually sensible but collectively catastrophic. The prisoner's dilemma scales up to planetary proportions, where the stakes aren't just personal advantage, but species survival itself. Perhaps this explains the Great Silence more comprehensively than any specific technological threat we've examined. Every civilization might face the same fundamental challenge of transcending the competitive dynamics that served them well during their evolutionary development, but become lethal in the context of existential technologies. Species that can't make this crucial transition consistently eliminate themselves, while those that successfully transcend competition might be so rare that we've never encountered evidence of their existence despite decades of searching. The window for making this transition appears to be narrowing rapidly for humanity. Climate change accelerates beyond our most pessimistic projections. Nuclear weapons proliferate to new actors with potentially less stable command structures and decision-making processes. Artificial intelligence development proceeds at breakneck pace without adequate safety measures or international coordination. Biotechnology capabilities expand faster than our understanding of their long-term implications and potential for misuse. Each day that passes without catastrophic breakdown might simply mean we haven't yet encountered the specific combination of circumstances that triggers our filtration. Like passengers on the Titanic in the hours before impact, we might be congratulating ourselves on smooth sailing while racing toward an iceberg we can't yet perceive through the darkness ahead. The psychological toll of living with this awareness creates additional layers of risk that compound our technological challenges in unexpected ways. How do societies maintain the long-term thinking necessary for species survival when individuals are overwhelmed by existential anxiety about the future? How do democratic systems address challenges that require immediate sacrifices for benefits that might not materialize for generations? How do we balance the urgency of action with the careful deliberation that such consequential decisions demand? The next time you look up at the night sky, remember that you're gazing into what might be the universe's greatest cemetery. Those points of light aren't just distant suns burning in the cosmic darkness, but potential tombstones marking civilizations that never made it past the test we're taking right now. Whether humanity joins that eternal silence or becomes something unprecedented in galactic history depends entirely on choices we're making in these precious moments when consciousness still flickers against the vast darkness between the stars. We might be the universe's last hope for understanding itself, the final experiment in self-awareness that either succeeds brilliantly or fails like all the others before us. Either way, the story of intelligence itself is being written through our decisions, our cooperation, and our wisdom. In the face of challenges that have apparently stopped every other species that has ever existed, the great filter awaits our response. Time is running out, but the outcome remains unwritten. The silence from space continues, offering no hints about whether we're approaching our graduation from the challenges that have eliminated every other technological civilization, or simply rushing toward the same barrier that has claimed countless species throughout galactic history. In this cosmic uncertainty, every choice becomes profound, every moment becomes precious, and every step forward carries the weight of intelligence's survival across the vast scales of space and time. As artificial intelligence systems become more sophisticated each month, as climate change accelerates beyond our most pessimistic predictions, as nuclear weapons spread to new nations, and as biotechnology provides increasingly powerful tools for both healing and destruction, we find ourselves compressed into what might be the most critical period in the history of consciousness itself. The next few decades could determine whether intelligence becomes a permanent feature of the universe or remains a brief, tragic experiment that the cosmos tried once and abandoned forever. We're not just living through human history anymore. We might be living through the final chapters of the only story consciousness will ever have the chance to tell. The weight of our cosmic moment becomes even more staggering when we realize that time itself might be working against us in ways we're only beginning to understand. Every technological leap forward doesn't just bring new capabilities. It fundamentally compresses the timeline within which we must solve increasingly complex existential puzzles. Think about the exponential acceleration of human knowledge and capability. It took us roughly 300,000 years to develop agriculture, another 10,000 years to build the first cities, just a few centuries to harness electricity and unlock the power of flight, decades to split the atom and reach the moon, and now we're measuring revolutionary breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and genetic engineering in terms of months rather than years. This compression isn't just impressive, it's potentially catastrophic. Our institutions, our social structures, our very psychology evolved to handle change that unfolds across generations. But we're now creating technologies that transform the fundamental nature of reality faster than human societies can adapt to understand their implications. We're essentially conducting the most dangerous experiment in the history of consciousness while blindfolded, working with forces we don't fully comprehend under time pressure that eliminates the possibility of careful testing and gradual implementation. Consider what this means for our decision-making processes. Previous generations could implement new technologies, gradually learning from mistakes and adjusting course as problems became apparent. The printing press took centuries to fully transform human society. The Industrial Revolution unfolded over decades, giving people time to understand and respond to its social consequences. But superintelligent AI might achieve consciousness on a Tuesday and redesign itself beyond human comprehension by Thursday. Genetic modifications that seem perfectly safe in laboratory conditions might have cascading effects across ecosystems that don't become apparent until it's too late to reverse them. Climate feedback loops might accelerate past tipping points faster than our climate models can track their progression. We're being forced to make irreversible decisions about the future of consciousness itself, based on incomplete information under impossible time constraints. It's like trying to perform brain surgery while riding a roller coaster in the dark. This temporal compression might represent the ultimate manifestation of the Great Filter. Perhaps every technological civilization reaches a point where the pace of change exceeds their ability to make wise decisions about that change. The species that survive might not be the most intelligent or the most technologically advanced, but those that somehow develop decision-making processes capable of functioning effectively under conditions of extreme uncertainty and time pressure. But there's another dimension to our predicament that makes it even more complex and potentially insurmountable. We're not just racing against time. We're racing against the fundamental limitations of human cognition itself. Our brains evolved to handle immediate, tangible threats in small groups of hunter-gatherers. We're exceptionally good at responding to visible predators, managing face-to-face social relationships, and solving problems that have clear cause and effect relationships unfolding over days or weeks. But existential risks operate on completely different scales. Climate change unfolds over decades. Nuclear proliferation involves complex game theory between dozens of nations. Artificial intelligence development requires understanding mathematical concepts that push the boundaries of human comprehension. Biotechnology operates at molecular scales where tiny changes can have enormous consequences. We're essentially asking Stone Age brains to solve Space Age problems, and the mismatch might be unbridgeable. Even our most brilliant scientists and policymakers are working with cognitive equipment that simply wasn't designed for the challenges we're facing. This creates what we might call the intelligence paradox of the great filter. The same cognitive capabilities that enable technological development also create blind spots that make managing that technology effectively nearly impossible. We're smart enough to build incredibly dangerous tools, but not wise enough to use them safely. We can split atoms but struggle to prevent nuclear war. We can modify genes but can't predict the long-term consequences. We can create artificial minds but can't ensure they'll share our values. Perhaps this cognitive limitation is the true great filter. Perhaps every species that develops technology eventually creates challenges that exceed their cognitive capacity to solve, leading inevitably to catastrophic mistakes that end their civilization. The universe might be filled with the remains of species that were brilliant enough to unlock the secrets of physics and chemistry, but not wise enough to survive their own discoveries. From this perspective, the question isn't whether we can develop better technologies, but whether we can evolve better minds capable of managing those technologies responsibly. And we might not have enough time to complete that evolution before our current technologies destroy us. But even as we grapple with these seemingly insurmountable challenges, there's something profound and almost miraculous about our current moment in cosmic history. Despite all the risks and uncertainties, despite the weight of responsibility and the narrowing of options, consciousness continues to persist and even flourish on our small blue planet. Right now, as you listen to these words, billions of human minds are thinking, creating, loving, and dreaming. Scientists are pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Artists are creating beauty that didn't exist before. Children are being born who might grow up to solve problems we can't even imagine. So here we stand, suspended between hope and terror, carrying the weight of consciousness itself into an uncertain future. The great filter looms before us like an invisible wall that has stopped every civilization that came before, yet we possess something no other species in Earth's history has ever had. The knowledge that this barrier exists, whether we're miraculous survivors of evolutionary bottlenecks already behind us, or walking blindly toward the same cosmic cliff that claimed countless others, remains the defining question of our time. But in these precious moments when intelligence still flickers against the vast darkness, every choice we make echoes across the cosmos.